Welcome, Pathfinders, to episode 2 of the after party, adventuring party thing. Yeah, so we're going to talk about the games that we've been playing the last couple of sessions, just going over a couple of things as we're making our way through The Half-Dead City, Book 1, Mummy's Mask Adventure Path by Jim Groves.
I haven't actually seen a whole lot of half dead or full dead
or any
dead.
kind of
No dead.
But apparently our friend Falto has seen many mummies, apparently.
Yeah, many mummies.
Right.
So many mummies.
It's alright. He's
he fought a mummy. He ran from a mummy. If he fought a mummy, like he ran from it.
It was just a zombie in a sheet. He's like, oh, God.
That seems like a mummy, yeah.
I mean, they're all foreigners. They may not know.
Well, so you guys had continued your exploration into the tomb of Akentepe, which has been shockingly undead-free.
Yeah.
Like, entirely undead-free. I think it's really just being mean to Jessica at that point.
Yep.
What you get for not taking favorite enemy constructs,
I took favorite
apparently.
enemy specifically to not use it, apparently.
You should have taken favorite enemy constructs, apparently.
No, I should have taken favorite enemy.
I think favorite enemy constructs is one of the suggestions, though.
It is.
Because it's just like, God, so many constructs.
But I was like, no way are they
At least
gonna
in this
have
first book,
like
it's
a
been pretty true.
golem level 1.
I think your idea for the golem being scarab, though, is a good idea.
They're 2,500 gold.
Unfortunately, those don't work on non-golems. They only work on actual golem, right? So they don't work on constructs.
Yeah, they don't work on normal constructs.
That's unfortunate.
Anyway, it's just kind of an interesting thing. And speaking of death, nearly lost Sudi in that, which is kind of intriguing. I haven't gotten to use the stuff I'm usually pretty good at where I don't have to look up rules, but I'm just like, I don't do suffocation enough that I know all those rules off the top of my head.
That's probably good.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's usually one of the things you pull out whenever we're underwater and somebody's gone unconscious.
Yeah.
I really thought we were a lot more screwed in that room than we ended up being.
Well, then the water stopped coming, and I was like,
yeah,
okay.
see, we didn't know that the electricity was going to stop and the water was going to stop. So when all that started, I'm like, we're going to TPK here. This is it.
Yeah, so fun thing. Here's the description in the book. I find this kind of interesting that the trap was designed so the chamber would quickly fill with water and drown any would-be thieves. Fortunately for the PC, the trap has never been triggered before and after 2,000 years has developed serious malfunctions. The doors still close and the electricity arcs still function, but the aqueduct no longer sends the full force of the river Sphinx into the room, and the water now only fills to a depth of 2 feet. More an inconvenience than the certain death it would be otherwise. Of course, the PCs are unlikely to realize this fact at first, so after the trap's electricity arcs are activated, have the PCs roll initiative, along with False Sarcophagus, which animates on its turn, attacks the nearest intruders, and then the water continues to float. It's more just like keeping everyone on their toes and then forcing you into close quarters with...
If we hadn't triggered the trap, would the sarcophagus have ever animated, or
the sarcophagus animates if you even if you disable the trap, the sarcophagus animates if you touch it. As a side note, I didn't think you guys would necessarily do this whole grave robbing thing. You could have also spent 30 minutes scraping all the gold leaf off of the sarcophagus.
That's not really our style.
We're
Even though it's a
bad.
false thing, it's just that still just kind of weird.
I mean, I wasn't even going to have Onuris open it. I was just having him
We were
look
just
at
wanting to
it.
read the hieroglyphs, which apparently all said ha 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 ha. And then,
Yep, you did.
If you're reading this, it is too late.
So yeah, Sudi, I think had the.
You're
Onuris
just rolling.
went down.
You're rolling really high. I had a 15 armor class.
So a little bit of what I wanted to do with the after party thing, and this is something I think is generally useful, is kind of talk about what you guys were dealing with behind the scenes. So for instance, the false sarcophagus had 36 hit points and a hardness of 5.
I figured it had a hardness of 5.
Please tell me it was bypassed by bludgeoning.
It is not, but it actually has a flaw to it. Brittle. It actually has a vulnerability to cold.
Literally would have never guessed that. This is what we get for not having anybody with knowledge arcana.
Knowledge arcana.
I did, so I've got ranks in it now.
What was the snake thing? Was it an elemental? Because when we couldn't critical it, I was like, oh,
yeah.
it's got...
The sandling is from the Tome of Horus.
With that, with knowledge of the planes and not being able to critical it, I was like, oh, it's got to be...
It's an earth elemental outsider. It only had 19 hit points, but it had a 5 bludgeoning damage reduction.
Yeah, that's why Sudi was
See,
able to get a good
Onuris
hit.
Interestingly
has
enough,
a 15 armor class. That's not bad for a first level character. You're just rolling high to like beat the shit out of
well,
us.
interestingly enough, Onuris, if you guys had anyone in the party that could have made a knowledge check and actually identified it, Onuris would have been great in that fight because it actually has a weakness.
What's its weakness?
It is vulnerable to water. For every 2 gallons of water that hits a sandling, it is slowed as the slow spell for 1 round.
You could have been slowing it.
I could have done that.
So fun thing for
Sad.
everyone out there, having knowledges to identify things is very useful.
Which is
Well, I
also
think-
why we usually always have everybody
Yeah.
covering the knowledges.
Well,
we just
We've
kind
shored
of,
that up now.
we kind of
Yeah,
suck
I'm
the
pretty
first
sure
level.
we fixed that. At
yeah, the
this
party
point.
just doesn't have any arcane spellcaster, and
Nope.
so there's
Well,
like a lot of things that are kind of missing from the.
And
Well, and I think sometimes you forget about it too, because for example, our Rise of the Rune Lords game, I played an investigator who had hella bonuses on all the knowledges, and it was friggin' amazing. And you kind of forget how often you need those knowledges, because you get in there and you're like, fight! Your base attack is really important. Yeah, but knowing what the crap it is also really important.
It is half the battle.
I was going to
Yeah.
say,
It's-
knowing is half the battle.
It's a large part of the reason that I like using the background skills, because it encourages players to go, okay, well, I can spend these skills on what I need for like combat stuff, but the background skills, even though the background skills don't include any of the knowledges that allow you to roll for information on monsters, they give you a lot of things like engineering and history, which gives you a lot more of the flavor.
Yeah, I was going
Yeah.
to say, I'm a huge lore fan, and so naturally, like any of the knowledge history, knowledge nobility, that stuff is always really interesting to me, just because it's one thing to kind of go into a
it's nice to know why we're doing.
yeah,
things.
to like go into a tomb and be like, okay, we're gonna rob this tomb, and this is pretty Egyptian, but like once you get into the history of the person and like who he was, you're like, oh, okay, like he feels like much more alive. I can understand why they did this grand burial for him and where he got all of his money from. It makes a lot more sense, and it just kind of makes it feel a lot more alive.
Yeah, the
Oh, yeah.
people that just run through and murderize everything, I'm like, there's so much lore and so much background and so much
Yeah.
detail about all of this stuff. Take a second and roll some knowledge checks and figure out what the hell's
I mean,
going on.
there are more than a few people at Paizo whose job is pretty much just to
Just
do
do
all the
this,
lore
yeah.
stuff. So like, show them some respect.
Well, it's funny because it's anytime that I'm running a game, there's two things that I always want to have happen, and it really applies to this last session, or to the first session here, episode 4. First off, I want the players to always pass all of their knowledge history checks, because
Yeah.
there's so much information here. I'm just like, please just let me give it to them, because a lot of times
Because there's
it's
no
like,
other way
okay.
to get it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so later on, I can kind of introduce it back in. It's like, oh yeah, you must have gone back and studied since you put some ranks in knowledge history, and now you know Akentepe was famous for this one battle. Or, for instance, you guys found a shield when you found the Scarab shield, but you also found a shield that was in there that you're like, oh, well, I have no idea what this shield is.
We know it's foreign.
Yeah,
It's not
it
Osirian.
was one of the foreign was it light wooden shield? Yeah, light
Yeah,
wooden
it's a
shields.
light wooden shield. Is a shield of similar design to those used by the eastern tribes in the Mwangi Expanse.
Oh, cool.
Just being able to, I mean, first now you can kind of visualize it as being
Yeah.
this African style shield. And then secondly, it's like, oh, well, I mean, that adds a whole new level. When did he march down to the
Yeah,
Mwangi
why
Expanse?
is someone from
and like,
Osirian all the way
you know,
down to the
did these
Mwangi
tribes
Expanse?
invade into Osirian and do a battle or something like that? And it's this whole like interesting level, but since no one has knowledge geography, it's just like, oh, that's a weird shield.
I have it
And you
now.
shove it in a bag. But
The
on
one
the
thing that does drive me nuts about the adventure paths is you get a bunch of information on the NPCs and stuff, and then sometimes there's like no way for us to ever
Oh,
find out
that is
any
my
of it.
least favorite
Yeah.
part.
We
is,
just stabbed this villain in the face, and there's no way that we're ever going to know any of their motivations. But they have a giant
it's
paragraph.
kind of up to the
Yeah.
game
you
master
know?
to work a lot of that stuff in.
Yeah, because if you've never read one of the adventure books, the last bits of it have the main characters that you'll see,
Yeah.
and they usually get a 2-page spread of exactly their entire backstory.
And the
of
only
what
time
their
we ever
purpose
saw them
is.
is when we confronted them and stabbed them in the face. You
Yeah,
know?
and sometimes that's just like, man,
Yeah,
that was a
sometimes
really
I
great
want to kind of
character.
like Bond villain that, where they're just expositioning while they're fighting you.
Yeah,
They're like, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you dare to fight me? I was trained in the Arcanarium and battled, my way through all the classes. And oh, okay, well, yeah, you appear to be very well trained. And 3 of the 4 players that I have here, with the exception of Jordan, have never. Well, no, Jessica's also game mastered
For children.
for children. Yes, as part of her whole teaching children the future of.
I tried it like way back in high school, and I was awful at it, and I've never
Yeah.
looked back.
I'm married to a game master, so I don't really need to worry
Yeah.
about it.
It's not my preferred playing, but it was interesting.
I think I like playing a player more, but I do enjoy game mastering also because you do get to see a lot more that's
I
behind
mean,
the scenes.
I actually do prefer being a game master, but and it kind of adds an interesting thing, because as a game master, I want everyone to pass all of their knowledge history checks. But there are also a lot of times, I know that when you're playing the rogue, it really sucks to miss a trap. But then
so much.
then I'm just sitting there, man, that fight would have been so much less exciting if the room wasn't flooding with water and all the rest of
Yeah.
the stuff. There are those cinematic moments where I'm like, okay, oh, well, you found and disabled a needle trap. that pops out of a box and stabs you. It's like, I don't care at all whether or not I find that. I would prefer you just find it so I don't have to really deal with it as much.
Yeah.
But for instance, the room with all of the arrows shooting out of the wall. Oh man, and then you have a time limit while, everyone's like hunkering down and trying to protect one another with their shields while the rogue's trying to pick this, while arrows are flying everywhere and trying to get out of the room.
See,
I
as a
love that
player,
stuff.
I'm glad she found that because I'm
don't
a
wanna
first level
die.
cleric. I have 2 freaking spells.
I would prefer not to be stabbed
Yeah.
with arrows.
Yeah, because that's actually happened to one of my characters in
You know-
another game, and it was not fun.
At
But-
higher levels where we've had the money where I can have some wands and where I have spells that it's like, okay, I can burn this. That's fine. But
Yeah.
at first level, I'm like, oh no.
Well,
No.
it's just when it's a generic trap where it's just like, okay, it's a simple trap. I don't really care. But anytime there's one of these set piece traps, the one that immediately springs to mind, and I won't, just for spoiler reasons, I won't give away where it is. It's in a Greg Vaughn book, though.
No, of course it
Oh,
is.
Greg.
No one here is surprised by that
There's
fact.
this amazing trap where it's like a pit trap. So it starts out, it's like, oh, that's kind of boring. And then it drops you down into this large circular room. And then the entirety of the room begins spinning like a crazy freaking tilt-a-whirl.
I know exactly
And then,
where
like,
you're referencing.
the walls are magnetic. And so, like,
Mhm.
all of the party members are magnetized to the outside wall and are being crushed by the centrifugal force. And the only way to deactivate it is if you can actually get to the center column and disable it from there. And so it's this amazing trap that is basically, it spins you around until everyone just dies of starvation or the blood rushing to their head or whatever. And then I ran it for a number of you guys. And you basically went, oh, there's a pit trap here, and then you disabled it, and then walked over the pit trap, and knew nothing about this amazing trap down
Well, I'm
there.
happy we didn't fall into the merry-go-round of death.
Yeah.
I was gonna say,
Which I don't-
I like those rides at the carnivals, but not when they don't stop.
Yeah, the vomit will.
Yeah.
Whirl, whirl.
But as a game master, I'm like, oh, that would have been an epic scene.
No,
to
it
run.
would have
Yeah.
been horrible.
But yeah, sometimes we're our own worst enemies in that regard.
It was
It was
amazing.
more of
I
a
would
like,
never
it
trap
was
forget
within
hilarious.
a trap on that one.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
hilarious.
this does also give us an opportunity to address something, just segueing a little bit from that also came up in this first part, episode 4. There's always this debate about resting or leaving a dungeon.
I am not going to sleep in the flippin' dungeon when
Well,
there's an inn. Like,
Well, let's go in this case, since you guys didn't have to rest in a dungeon, leaving a dungeon before you complete it.
it
And-
depends. It really depends on the circumstances. In a
Yeah.
circumstance like this, where we're inside the city, the whole thing is regulated by the church. Yeah, there's a risk that another group might come down here, but let's just go back to the inn and we'll come back in the morning.
To me, it's a little bit more almost, it depends on what the occupants are. So when you're in this, like so far you guys have run into, let's see, trap,
Bugs.
bugs,
Elemental
and lots
thing,
of
Yeah.
animated
constructs,
objects,
yeah.
and some elementals, and then some more. I mean,
Nothing that
it's
resets.
yeah.
Really.
Well, and it's also it's nothing that's intelligent.
Yeah, nothing that's gonna rove come look for us.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah.
You
or
know,
Well, and it
Makes
also
stuff
was
crazy.
advantageous of us to leave to sell some stuff, refill some potions. We
Yeah.
wanted to get that shield identified.
yeah.
And if we decided to camp out down here, we would have missed out on all that characterization and everything
That's
that
fair.
happened
Yeah.
at the end.
Also.
It's like, okay, we're out of healing, so we have to leave, but is this really a good spot for us to be retreating?
Right.
You know?
Well, and inevitably you run into something. The big three culprits to this would be an incorporeal creature, where you're at too low of a level to actually have magical
Yeah.
weapons.
No, thank you.
A swarm, such as you're facing right now, where you don't have the area effects or
Well, we
anything.
don't
to
have an
actually-
arcane spellcaster.
I don't
right
even
there,
have a
so-
bludgeoning weapon.
I have bludgeoning weapons. I'm gonna be a rock star in that fight.
I'm
I
a
have torches,
little baby
so-
cleric. I don't have boom spells yet.
See, because the thing that's coming into my head
You're just
right
gonna
now,
tuck behind your shield and let it
is-
part around you
Yeah,
and eat
pretty
everyone
much.
else.
we need Will Smith to show up and like start stomping on him.
Well, there's not a giant papa cockroach coming out.
I know, but it's the first thing. that popped in my
Even
head.
Will Smith does no damage to a cockroach swarm. The third one is always creatures with high damage reduction,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
which
well,
you know
that's
if you
just-
run into at a low level is just rough.
Like I said, dungeon crawls, because you never feel like it's okay, this is our first site and we're down here exploring and you don't really know, were we supposed to be able to do this all in one go and we just suck? Or, you know, did they expect us to go take breaks?
Well, I mean,
you
to
know?
be fair, you guys cakewalked through the fight against the Mining Beetle, so if
Yeah,
you
but they
guys had
just fight.
decided to walk across the hall before you went down the
Mhm.
hallway to the flood chamber, you still would be facing a cockroach
Yeah.
swarm now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you feasibly would have been facing a cockroach swarm with absolutely no
Nothing.
health left. And I think I might have touched about this a little bit during the after party in the first one, but just as kind of a show of hands, it's not a literal show of hands because that would be terrible for a podcast. what is the general impression of dungeon crawl first books? Because I'm always a little bit on the fence where it's, for me, I enjoy the dungeon crawls. I enjoy going through and doing all the dungeon crawls and all the rest of that stuff. But it's always one of those, in the first book, it's kind of rough to do like a dungeon crawl straight. And so rolling into one right off of the bat, which a number of adventure paths, this one, you can obviously go back to town anytime that you want. And just like leave the dungeon behind.
Well, we're not really leaving town.
Yeah.
We're just in the
Up the
dead
block.
part of town.
So I would say, generally speaking, I like them.
I don't really like dungeon crawls in general. I don't mind them in first books.
Doing the dungeon crawl right from the get-go is
First level's hard.
not my favorite. I mean, I don't dislike dungeon crawls, but I almost like them to be disguised. It shouldn't feel like I'm just slogging through a
Like
dungeon.
Serpent Skull, I think was a really good one.
Nah.
Well,
No,
so
you don't like
I
it?
was thinking Legacy.
I would
when-
very much argue that Serpent Skull didn't have a dungeon crawl in it
And
until the very end.
the
of
very
Yeah,
last
until the very
book
end.
definitely had some dungeon crawl stuff. I just don't like dungeon crawls at low level.
Well, and the one thing that I would really say that I think is a huge advantage and a strong tip of the hat here to Jim Groves for his writing of it. I've loved a number of Jim Groves' books. He did one of the books that I've run through before in Wrath of the Righteous. I haven't had the chance to do Reign of Winter yet, but I know that he did the Shackled Hut in Reign of Winter, which from what I
that's a good
understand
book.
is a very good book.
A really good book.
So
half of this table has not played Reign of Winter yet.
Yeah.
No
Yeah, we
spoilers,
play that with a
but
different
y'all are
group.
gonna have a good time.
It
Yeah.
is
I-
a really good adventure
I would give
path.
myself amnesia to play it again.
Yeah, it's a really good adventure path.
and not to disparage the writers of either of these other Adventure Path books. We've done ones previously where it's just, okay, book one dungeon where you're exploring this old ruin, or book one dungeon where you're exploring this haunted ruin. You can basically like delve into it and then come back out, but it's all one dungeon.
Mhm.
Whereas the Half-Dead City, as it's kind of been established since episode 1,
We're gonna have 3 different sites.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
three
so
mini
it's
dungeons.
a
And that's
lot of
assuming
opportunities
now
to
that-
go in, explore, and then retreat back out.
And that's assuming now that we've met these other people, we don't end up running into wherever Marin is if we find out he's in trouble,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and like I said, you get the thing where you have to come back out because there is that character development and stuff. Because if you're not from Wati, like, and you've come in and you go right into this dungeon crawl thing, and you basically don't talk to anybody, like, you have no support, nobody to back you up. If we get into trouble, now we could at least be like, hey. We found this thing, we don't know how to beat it. Hey, here's like 10 people we can go talk to be like, hey,
Or
do you
it's
have
one
any
of those
ideas?
if we hadn't rested in the dungeon and hadn't come out, and like we're walking through to our next site or back to this one, and Rick's like, "Oh, you hear like dogs barking, and it sounds like it's in distress." We're gonna be like, whatever.
That's true.
And
yeah.
now we're gonna be like, "Oh, dogs barking, and it sounds like they're in trouble. We got to go check on Marin." You know?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure knowing this group, we'd probably hear
Dogs are in
dog in
trouble.
distress. We're still gonna
I'm
go
just
help,
saying- I'm
but
just
we'd be
saying.
like, halfling.
Speak for
Yeah.
yourself.
He'll be alright.
Sudi's like, "No."
I was talking about just like
Every
as
cat for himself.
people, like we're
Wait.
I think in every single game, adventure path, whatever, if there's ever an animal in distress, or if there's an animal that we're fighting, our first instinct is, I don't want to.
Can we handle
We
animal
talk
to
our way
calm
out
them
of
down?
fights with animals a lot.
That's why it's
Yeah.
always good to have the druid that can just wild empathy it. And
well,
then
I
call
have
it
a
day.
ranger.
So you guys, I mean, you all have mentioned Marin and Falto, who you
Mhm.
met in episode 5.
Yes.
And I always actually appreciate an opportunity to sit back for a while and meet with NPCs and talk with them and get like another face and everything.
And apparently pull
Well,
pranks on them.
Well,
Pull
it
pranks
makes
on those
you
if you need to,
like
yeah.
give a crap about what you're doing.
And it's
know?
also just one of those, you can just go, it's like, oh, okay, there's a whole bunch of other like tomb robbers and everything in here. But at the same time, you're just like, Falto obviously has some sort of history to him.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I
like-
don't think he's running around with the best people, and he says he's with the Cleric of Serenray, but we haven't seen her yet. I
Yeah,
would like to
yeah.
see
My-
her
my-
holy symbol.
I'm going to go ahead and
please.
call it. I think she's already dead.
Yeah,
No, I
maybe.
think she's just either she doesn't
Yeah.
want to associate with the Hell Knight,
Which, I mean,
Yeah,
possibly.
that seems like an
or
odd pairing.
maybe
He
she's
said
not.
a guy that trained for the Hell Knights. I don't think he's actually
But he's
a
not
Hell
wearing
Knight.
Hell Knight armor.
He's still
Yeah.
scary and big, and I don't know.
But yeah, I kind of want to see her holy symbol and be like, are you
Yeah.
really a Cleric of Serenray, or is that what you just told a naive boy over here?
Isn't Serenray? No, that's not. That's Kadira. JK.
I feel like we're
Okay.
gonna end up saving his butt at some point.
Maybe.
From
It just
his
seems
crazy.
I mean,
friends.
the breadcrumbs have kind of been put out there that, like,
Yeah.
there's people that are out there trying to rob us. We're either going to get robbed or we're going to help somebody not get robbed.
Yeah, his
Is he gonna be your
shady group
character's
members.
boyfriend?
We're going to get
Yeah.
mugged at some point, also. I'm
You
just calling
can't
it.
date him. He's very annoying.
She's not interested.
Come on, he's so
Citra
charming, though.
is treating him like a troll. Like, aw, you're
We're
cute.
gonna
Tap,
have
tap.
a throwdown with
Hat lady.
Valerana, or what is her name?
The woman with the hat.
I wrote it
Oh.
down, but I don't think I spelled it right.
La la la.
Yeah,
The-
I know.
the hat
Every time.
lady.
Yeah,
They
that's-
know which
And then I
it
think
is.
of the dog.
Hein. She doesn't have a heat or a hein or whatever.
But that's just
Uh,
what I imagine.
Velriana.
Uh-huh.
Valeriana,
Hypaxis.
yeah, so we'll fight her.
And the rest of the Scorched Hand.
I also owe money to a halfling.
I really feel like
Sure.
we're just gonna start calling her Val.
I'm calling her the hat lady.
Yeah,
the hat
hat
lady.
lady. We
That's
tend to
what
give
you get for
nicknames.
Curse you, hat lady.
We tend to
Yes,
give nicknames to things. Sometimes not very nice nicknames.
No, and sometimes they're interchangeable nicknames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yeah.
get for having a very distinctive thing. In your,
There's like a
life
flaming
description.
McSkullface.
Flamey
at one point.
McSkullface.
Skullface
That
is
was-
my fave.
We
Yeah.
also had, maybe you can edit this out, Angel.
Yeah.
That one was
Yeah.
kind of mean.
If you do intend like intentional profanity, like having a bit of a space there does make it a lot easier to. So like it's like doing angel. Like that's a lot easier to edit out than all at once. But I understand what you're going for.
Can we make up nicknames for every bad person and just compile them into a fun trivia game that we play with listeners at some point?
Is
Guess the
trivia-
adventure path, and then we just give you the names, and you have to
Yeah.
guess where they come from.
I know which one Flaming McSkullface is from.
I mean,
Yeah.
well, you were there.
Well, I just like to do it for this podcast and see if people can remember what the actual name of that person was.
Hat
because
lady.
We're obviously
Lady.
terrible. with the names.
Velriana.
I don't care to know her name. She was not very nice.
She
You
wasn't
didn't
that
even
bad,
talk
actually.
to her.
I certainly did. I went with you.
Oh, that's right, you did.
Because I was like, dang it.
She
He's
wasn't
gonna
as
get
bad
knocked
as,
over.
but she wasn't as bad as I expected her to be.
No, she was fine. She just
She's
seemed
just
kind of like
posh.
self-absorbed, and she just wants her Nethys stuff. It's fine.
Yeah, but Nethys is a
She's a
neutral
little
deity, so she could totally be evil.
Sure,
Yeah.
she could, but
It's possible.
she also could just be, not a ray of sunshine.
Not
Yeah,
a
well,
sunshine.
I don't imagine.
And
she'd
she's
be
just
very-
looking for a sacred place to her deity.
Yeah,
So,
she's
I mean,
just, I get it.
Yeah, in other games we've had the same thing happen. Only they were Red Mantis Assassins.
they're just
Wow.
looking for a sacred place to their deity.
Just looking for a sacred place to stab you in the back. Hopefully, or dance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And throw a wicked dance party.
If you've never fought Red Mantis,
Yeah.
Oh,
dance.
that
You
was...
throw a wicked dance party and you just toss a couple of those glow sticks that you got from the bugs in there.
That was pretty good
Check out this rave.
in the one time, like, everybody but my character got entranced by the Red
Yeah.
Mantis at their dance party, and I was
And
like,
so
what is happening?
imagine like a praying mantis doing his little thing with his little scissor arms and everything, and we always make this noise.
And then we do our own dance. So it's a little bit like,
Like shaking
A
Macarena.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah, like chicken
Yes,
margaritas.
yeah.
Yeah, we got some rockets going on.
Yes.
not
Macarena.
I just
I
like.
thought I was gonna get.
Yeah. I was
gonna
like
get that. I thought
everyone
I was gonna
agreed
get it.
with them, and I'm just sitting there. It's like Macarenas.
Oh god, I almost thought I was gonna. I said it, and I was like, I just said that. Didn't
Yeah.
I?
So if you can imagine some fully garbed Red Mantis Assassins doing the Macarena at you as they slowly stealth up to assassinate you.
That would be the
Wow.
best thing ever.
Morocco dance is a little bit.
I almost got away with it too.
Now I'm just
I
picturing.
would have gotten away with it too.
Now I'm just picturing a red mantis assassin
Hey,
doing the
Macarena.
little the maraca dance that the
Oh,
weird tree thing.
yeah, from the
Breath
new
of
Zelda
Wild,
game
where
does,
he-
yeah.
So he's doing the little butt shake.
That is probably the
Oh, I
funniest.
can't remember that guy's name.
I don't know, it's-
What is that power that gives you
No.
extra
Yeah,
inventory?
email it in to us if you guys know.
Oh, you go to
It's a decade thing, right?
Media Gothy or whatever they
Mendigati?
are. Sure.
Yeah.
And then you walk into their like assassin training school, and there's literally a dance class, and they're like, "Okay, let's do it. 5, 6, 7, 8," and then they all practice.
Have you ever wondered why they're all so fit? I mean, they're on like dance aerobics.
Yes.
It's all part of the whole like Red Mantis training.
And if they
montage.
fail out, if they're not murdered, if they fail out and they're not murdered, they join a dance troupe.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, if killing people never works out for you, there's always Broadway
Yeah, apparently.
or the Galarian equivalent. of.
I was gonna say murder place.
That would
Murder
be
place.
like
Go for murder place.
place.
Yeah, I was gonna say if I'm a failed assassin, I'm gonna go to the murder place.
Well, if adventuring doesn't pan out, murder place.
Yeah. That's basically what most adventuring is. We also, during this, got a chance to delve a little bit into Sagira's backstory.
Yeah.
And some fun things.
Apparently.
I don't know if you want to talk any about your backstory.
You either seem to be a lady of the night, or you are a former lady of the night.
I am
or
not
just...
a lady of the night. I am the muscle that guards the ladies of the night.
Ah, I see.
She's the bouncer.
I'm kind of like the bouncer, and those are my ladies that I protect,
Fair enough.
who have a really bad landlord and need money.
Yes,
So what you're
and-
saying is that we're going to be getting rid of this landlord.
Well, I am chaotic neutral, but I think it might be easier just to pay off the landlord.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't know how my character being lawful good would feel about just offing
We do not
this
invite
guy.
you.
Don't invite me either. I'm lawful neutral.
We don't invite either of these
What is
lawful
it with
people.
lawful? Man, I'm neutral good. I'd be like, oh, this guy's
Hey,
treating
if I
me
had a
badly,
choice to be a
you know?
not
Horus
lawful
is a
neutral?
lawful neutral deity, so two of my options, I mean, all of my options, lawful.
Yeah.
Bastet is a chaotic neutral deity of secrets and intrigue.
So your character is following Bastet.
Yep.
I think Sudi's the only one that's following one of the core deities, right?
I
You
believe
follow
so.
Bastet. You follow
Yeah, I follow
Pharasma.
Pharasma.
I follow Osiris.
You follow Osiris, and you follow Horus.
So yeah, that's the one normal thing that Sudi's got going for him is follows Pharasma.
Although you should
I-
totally follow Bastet,
Me
man.
follows the
I just
old
kind of
ways.
stumbled upon Bastet, and it worked out.
You know, when you're born with a deity's holy symbol on your face.
You don't really get the choice. Yeah, it's true.
You don't really get the option.
Three of you do worship the old gods, the ancient gods of Old Assyrian, which, just for a little bit of like a delve into the backstory here, they are again the deities that most of us associate with Egypt. So Anubis and Bastet and Hathor and Horus and Osiris, etc., etc. Before, these were all worshipped alongside of Nethys and Pharasma and
Nethys
Serenre.
I think Nethys and Pharasma were really the big two.
Yeah, and Serenre was as well, although Serenre's church took on a different tone once the Kelishite interregnum began. But basically, during the Kelishite interregnum, when Osirians was basically conquered by a foreign power.
A lot of people turned away from the old gods.
So basically, like, the carvings were defaced, statues were toppled, temples were razed, etc., and the belief in the ancient gods declined. Although it was never truly wiped out, as is evident by the three of you. And given an opportunity, obviously, to worship a deity outside of the norm, it's kind of tempting to just take it.
Yeah.
And there's actually a whole interesting thing pertaining towards it, and I'm not going to get into it here, but I might get into it at a later time pertaining towards, like, why the gods of the ancient Osirians kind of faded into the background. But Bastet, who is your deity, is the goddess of cats, pleasure, and secrets. Popular goddess amongst the bards and women of all classes. She is the patron of spies, rogues, and thieves. Most of her clerics are women, although men are welcome to the priesthood, and both genders work as secret prostitutes in Bastet's temples, which host celebratory festivals, replete with dancing, drinking, and revelry. We've kind of touched a little bit on your character's backstory. We haven't really delved much, but we have introduced a lot of people, I think, listening at the very beginning kind of assume that you're in this for just the money. I think the rest of your party probably mostly assumes that, with the exception of maybe Sudi, who
Sudi knows
realizes
better.
that beneath that cold veneer of a heartless grave robber is a cat-loving woman who... crazy cat lady who guards her sacred prostitutes.
Yes. A cat-loving lesbian who wants to
Okay.
save the Temple of Bastet.
I mean, what's wrong with that?
I mean, it's still about the money, but
Yeah.
it's, not just for herself.
It's
Yeah.
not for a selfish reason.
Which is kind of interesting because she doesn't, this is the only family she's ever felt like she had family connections to. So,
And kind of introduced that there's this other character. You got a chance to speak with Sabra, who runs the temple there, and we introduced this other character, at least in name, of Mesuta, who basically owns the building. It kind of came across as there's something going on there that he wants the temple out.
but yeah, that's a current problem. And, that's the classic evil landlord kind of trope where he demands more money than people can pay, and then when they can't pay, kicks them out, right?
So kind of like Kingpin and Daredevil, where it's
Yeah.
just like,
I
I'm
was
just going to
say
let the
there's
place
no rent
just-
control in Wati.
Yeah, there's no rent control in Watis. They're just trying to run everyone out.
Yes.
I feel like it will become more interesting later on for Heather's character Onuris, as everyone else here came from poverty.
Yep.
I did not.
And Onuris was born with a silver
one
spoon
of
in his
to
mouth.
one of the richest families in the city.
My family started out as like middle class and everything, but
Yeah.
they were poor by the time I was born. And then I definitely spent some time.
Yeah. And Sudi started out the poorest of everyone. So.
Yeah, you did.
I didn't even
'Cause
have a
started out
family.
okay.
I was born an orphan.
So
A borphan, if you will.
Oh my god.
I'm pretty sure when you were born without parents, you're just an orphan. I don't think the borphan.
You couldn't have been born an orphan because your mother existed.
Nah, that is totally possible. She dies in childbirth, and the dad's already dead. You can be born an orphan.
Oh my
Well,
gosh.
technically you're
and then
born.
someone took him to the SPCA and
Good home.
the OSPCA.
I was gonna say I was picked up by Sphinx mommy and daddy who decided nope, don't want this, and they threw me in the river.
Yeah, put you in a cardboard box with a heating pad underneath it. We'll come back from later. So, approaching your character's backstory and everything else, which is what we delved into a little bit in episode 5 there. Take me through, I suppose, just for Jessica here, take me through your thought process on how you went and built your character. Did you start out with the idea of, I'm going to worship Bastet?
Well, originally she was going to be a catfolk who worshipped Bastet. And then
Well, that makes sense.
I didn't want to be a catfolk because I wanted to be a suli instead. But I like the Bastet part because she's a pretty cool deity. She has a long history. She's actually kind of an amalgamation of different African tribal deities that were all cat themed. And I think, what is it, Set something? There's a lioness.
Sekhmet.
Deity of
Sekhmet.
war. Sekhmet. Sekhmet and Bastet used to be the same,
Yeah.
interchangeable, and now they've just kind of split off. But
And in the Pantheon, at the very least, in Osirian, Sekhmet is Bastet's sister.
oh, that makes sense. And then once I was that, it was well, I know that my backstory, I'm going to be a grave robber type and have a rough upbringing. And so growing up and then living in a brothel seemed to make sense and added some depth that Sagira needed. So
Well, Bastet is a good choice for you because your character's personality thus far lines up pretty well with Bastet. The whole idea that she's like a goddess of protection and, warding and defense, and she's usually very laid back and kind of interested in pursuing her own pleasures and everything, unless she's roused to anger, at which point she is fiercely protective and violent when necessary.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in getting to go a little bit further, tie in your character's backstory, delve into that. Here, hopefully, pretty soon, we'll get a chance to look at everyone else's backstories.
Dun dun dun.
So, I suppose let's move on to talk about episode 6. The one with the something or another. I haven't come up with a name for it yet.
The one with all the secret doors.
The one with all the
I was gonna say,
all the secrets.
The
I
one
think it
with
is one
all
of
the perception checks.
I was gonna say that it was when we started suddenly finding it was secret doors behind secret doors behind secret doors.
I mean, it was very authentic.
I mean, the Egyptians did put a lot of secret doors and stuff in there. Tombs, false tombs, secret doors, giant stone slabs that aren't meant to be moved ever that sealed off entryways to parts of the tomb so they couldn't be looted.
Don't steal my.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's the theme of this adventure pass so far. Please don't steal my thing.
So the one question that I do have from that, Rick, and maybe you'll enlighten us, what the
Okay.
heck were those bug things that we stomped on?
Oh, the bug things.
Yeah, what are those and what were their abilities? Because we never got to show them because they kind
And
of
were they
chumped
worth
out.
money if you just captured them?
Yeah, because they kind of chumped out, but but I'm assuming small size. They
Yeah.
were pretty big.
Yeah, they're about dog size. They're technically small size creatures.
Yeah.
They were only a challenge rating half, so I mean,
If
Yeah,
it's a
they
bug and it's dog size, that is not a
Yeah, it's
small
the
I
first
could never be an adventurer. I'd be when we got to the tomb and there was a giant scorpion, I would have been like, okay, I tried, peace out.
Yeah, miss me.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the creatures are mining beetles.
Mining beetles.
mining
That's
beetles.
cool.
They like to dig.
Yeah, basically, that's kind of what they do.
Dig a
It's
tunnel.
they're distant cousins to the fire beetles, except for the fire beetles can
Higher
be
challenge
above
rating,
ground
right?
and everything else. The mining beetles are almost entirely subterranean.
Oh, that's what I like.
And so they're pretty much fire beetles with the advanced template. So much like the fire beetles, they just bite,
Oh, okay.
and that's about all they do.
Okay.
There's an interesting element that you can kind of tie back in. And part of the reason why they're so
They were gonna finish
Violent.
the tomb for Akentepe.
they're building the tomb for him. Don't worry, guy. We saw your little diorama thing. We think you're real cool. They started worshiping him as a god. Akentepe's revenge. No, it's actually one of the kind of the interesting things is the two mining beetles there were being preyed upon by the camel spiders that you fought previously, which is why you found the carapaces in the other room. And so they're even more aggressive than usual and attack anything that comes down the steps because they view it as invading their territory and are just like, oh god, it's more camel spiders back to kill us.
Oh, buddies, we're so much more deadly.
Yeah, and I totally forgot about those other carapaces, or else we could have been like, hey, are those the same as the other ones? But yeah, no, that was a miss on our
You
part.
could kill them and do the things, but yeah, you can
We'd be
take their
terrible adventurers.
yeah, you can take their little glowing things, and I think they keep producing light 1d6 days or something
Oh,
like
that's
that.
a long
Wow,
time.
actually,
Yeah.
yeah.
So they're about half the illumination of a torch, but I mean, it's still kind of useful just to hold on to them and
If
just...
we had-
Again, they're like the weird little glowy things from Pitch Black that they found all over the wall.
Yeah, you can put them in a jar and just shake them up.
Instead
If we
of
had
instead of
captured-
fireflies, you have weird little beetle glands.
If we had captured them, would we have been able to sell them?
I would have let you sell them.
Huh, that's
They don't actually have like a listed price, but under the fire beetle stuff, they talk about how caged fire beetles are a popular source for long-lasting illumination among eccentrics and miners.
Huh, well, there you go.
So I would have probably come up with some sort of
I
price.
would have liked to see you try to like drag these things to market, though. That would have been kind of hilarious.
They're dog sized. I just need a purse.
Or a leash.
The horrible purse dogs.
Here,
Look
this
at
is
my
my
purse dog.
this is my purse beetle.
It glows.
Yeah,
It helps me find
they're
myself.
actually on the Summon Monster 1 thing, because a lot of people like fire beetles for Summon Monster 1.
Yeah, they are.
So they're a really popular thing there. I mean, these weren't like celestial or infernal. They're just advanced
They're
template.
just scared little bugs that we murdered.
I feel bad. We didn't know.
Yep.
No druids in this party.
You killed Mr. and Mrs. Mining Beetle. Left a whole bunch of Mining Beetle orphans
Oh,
Mining
God.
Beetle orphans.
in the little like holes down
Why
there.
do you have to like give these things backstories and
They have,
make
like,
me
a-
feel bad for killing?
They have a rich,
bugs?
complicated history. They're just doing their things when you're around. There was a whole ecosystem down here that you just destroy between these spiders and these mining beetles and their turf war over the room with the tapestry.
The scorpion beetles too, or
It was just a
whatever.
scorpion.
The
Scorpion.
good news is they
Yeah.
didn't have any like eggs or anything that Jess would want to keep and raise.
Yeah, I mean the the scorpion
Yeah,
was
but-
just like a mercenary. He was coming in here to, highest bidder.
Wow.
There was a whole like insectoid thing.
We just destroyed the entire subplot.
Yeah.
We're done.
They had their own epic quest that they were going to go on. Now it'll never happen.
Actually, no. We've killed the parent, so that means the child will be an adventurer.
Oh, it's true.
I'm
That is by
Bug Man.
requirement. Yep. Either that or he'll go up to the surface, meet up with some sort of crazy bug druid. It's like, bug druid.
Yes.
There are vermin druids.
There are
aren't
vermin
That
druids.
is what's
Yep.
going to happen. That is canon.
So yeah, you guys managed to continue your exploration and everything. About how close you think you are?
I
now?
hope that now that we went through the room with the stuff for the afterlife and it hadn't been
I hope
touched,
it's
that
fixed.
we're getting close.
I also hope that if
Well,
when we
almost
defeat
nothing
these
you found has
horrible
been touched.
cockroaches things.
Oh yeah, cockroach swarm.
Yeah,
Yeah, we're
Then-
about to get devoured by flesh-eating cockroaches.
I mean,
Although
essentially.
they should be
fine.
scarabs, but it's cool. It's fine.
I kind of thought it was going to be kind of short to start with, so like something we might be able to get through in a single like dive, and now it just keeps going down and down and down. I'm like, man, this guy's rich. Like,
I
you
wouldn't
dig
be-
like
I
10
got lucky.
le-
I
10
really
levels
wouldn't
down.
be surprised if our second sight is like small, and then the
Maybe.
third sight is like.
That's if we even get to a second sight. This
Prepare to
place
be
is huge.
surprised.
We just get all the
Dun,
great
dun,
sites because we have the
dun.
good luck.
We get all the great sights because we're the player character.
Yeah, and the other people are going to be jealous, and there's going to be feuds.
There's gonna be a few. We're gonna have to jump in and like
We'll
save
have to
some
fight
fights at some
back.
point.
It's like, oh, okay, well, of course we're going to get the most important sites because we're the main characters.
I was
You
kind
know.
of joking, but it's also
But-
kind of true.
But
you
yeah,
know?
but there's also this kind of view that it's like, do you get the most important sites because you're the main characters, or are you the main characters because you get the most important sites? Just because you happen to be at a festival in a small town and protect the town from goblins, are you destined, or were you just in the right place at the right time and then just continue on from there?
I think a large part of that is how your character interprets that.
Yeah, because like
Yeah.
Sudi following Pharasma, is the deity of fate, believes it's fate, like believes that it is put in the right place at the right time to do the things that need to be
Yeah,
done.
and like not to like reveal too much of Onuris' backstory, but he's like looking for a purpose to why certain things have happened in his life. So he's
Yeah.
expecting that something important is going to happen. He just doesn't know when or where.
He's trying to find Jesus.
Not
Yeah.
really.
Sagira's the
Wrong
opposite.
country.
She does not expect anything out of this except for the gold because she has her own personal stuff that she has.
You know, and
she wants to do.
Onuris doesn't. Me as a player, I know this is the kickoff to the adventure pass.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is the part of the start of the important thing. But Onuris isn't expecting this to lead to what he's looking for.
I discourage that level of metagaming.
Yeah. So he's here because he wants to protect the tombs. He wants to protect the dead from being desecrated.
Well, I'm not
You
saying that
know.
any of you don't have a reason to be there, but it's that whole idea of some people are born into greatness and others have it thrust upon them. I find that most heroes usually have it thrust upon them.
Yeah, and occasionally you have the
Yeah.
character that's like, no, I've been looking for, or I've been expecting this, or
Well,
something.
the opposite. Sometimes you have a character that you think is going to be really cool, and you play through the first book, and then at the end of the first book, the plot hook continues on into the second book, and then you're just left with this character that you're like, this character wouldn't do
Go,
this.
yeah.
This character wouldn't go on
Yeah.
that adventure, wouldn't want to continue, has no motivation to move forward. And a lot of time it happens if your first character dies. Bringing in a second character gets a little clunky. But yeah, so sometimes the character just isn't meant to be a hero.
One of the ones that springs to mind, spoiler? Maybe a minor spoiler alert here for Second Darkness, but most of my players have not played Second Darkness, so it's not a huge spoiler. Between book 2 and 3, there's a big departure from what is presented in the player's guide, to the point that a lot of people felt that there was a huge interrupt between, it was just, oh, my character's motivations make perfect sense in book 1, and they still make decent sense in book 2, but then it's just like, it just kind of stops after that. If you made a character based off of the player's guide, it's very hard to even justify your character's continued action in book 3.
Yeah.
And it's that same thing where, oh, well, sometimes you make a character and they fit great. One of the best things that Paizo's added to the role-playing community in general is the concept of campaign traits.
I really like the campaign traits.
Yeah.
Because when I sat down to make Onuris, actually, I knew I wanted to play a cleric, but I didn't really know how I wanted to go with that. I tossed around like Anubis and a few other of the old gods, and then I was looking at the character, like the campaign traits, and I found one I really liked, and I was able to pretty much build the rest of his character from the campaign trait I chose, and I think it fits really well.
I did something similar, and then you actually let me kind of tweak it to almost fit my story better, which was really cool. Which y'all don't know about yet.
Yeah, we have all this. It's all mystery.
Well, just more an idea of like revealing it in character.
Yeah, so normally we all know, what campaign did you take, and a little bit of our characters' backstories before we even start playing because we've talked about it. But with this one, we're all like, we're being all super secret. So when it gets revealed in the game, it's actually a surprise to the players.
Yeah, so it's not just one of those, okay, introduce your characters, and it's just, hello, I am Grog the Fighter. I'm a human warrior, and I'm just here because well, my father died at a young age, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's all pull out the couches and tell you our life story.
Yeah, and I always hate when people just like info dump their backstories at the beginning of a campaign. Like, well, I don't really have any connection to your character, and I'm not going to remember why you're on this quest for vengeance against the Six-Fingered Man. You guys got the last of hopefully this tomb to explore, then you can get back to town for a little bit, maybe socialize some, get a little bit more role-playing in there, and then hopefully find a giant pile of massive amounts of loot so that Onuris is no longer in the hole as far as owing the rest of the party.
We haven't sold that shield yet, so I'm not technically in the hole. Hopefully, if we find a massive pile of loot, I will be out of the hole.
Yeah. And assuming that Marin survives, I think you need to pay him back for a sword.
I gotta see a halfling about a sword.
Yeah, you're amazing. Yeah, you're amazing. Insect Bane +1 sword.
Hey, but I did hook him up with some dogs, so
that's true.
Also, if nothing else, we can drown our sorrows with Nard.
Nard.
We have a lot of Nard now.
I'm good not doing that.
Yeah,
I'm
good.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Isn't it like a?
Isn't it a perfume?
Yeah,
I thought it was an
pretty sure
oil.
I didn't think you drank it.
I don't think you drink it.
Sudi drinks it.
Now that you've said that,
it is an expensive, oily perfume.
Yeah, don't drink that, Sudi.
You just walk in there and
It's like
just in there. It's like,
dish.
man,
It's like when you're
this
trying
is the
to
most
eat
disgusting
something.
drink ever.
It's like when you're trying to, you just open something and your pet cat thinks it's food and sticks their nose in it, and you're like, no!
It's cats and antifreeze.
Turns out that 50% of Nard's construction is just catnip. Oh. All right, so we'll leave it off there. Come back and check out episode 7, which should be coming out here shortly. We're putting them out on a weekly basis. And then we'll be back for part 3 of our after party series after episode 9.
We'll tell you more about Texas.
Yeah.
Return next time for Mummy's Mask.
Bye,
So
Felicia.
yeah, come back, check us out here soon. And until next time, good luck, Pathfinders.